Today's episode is a conversation with Todd Woodburn, an underwriting supervisor at Highview Insurance, who's been in the insurance industry for nearly 20 years. One thing we're trying to do with this podcast is to cut through the noise. There's a lot of talk about what AI could do, hypotheticals, projections, hype. What we want to hear are stories from people who are using AI right now to do real work, and the truth about what works and what doesn't. Started his AI journey doing what most of us did, having open ended conversations with ChatGPT. Months later, he and his team at Highview built AI powered workflows that cut a 4 hour manual process down to 5 minutes. They were able to double their submission volume with a smaller team. Todd has a really thoughtful take on something a lot of companies get wrong. AI is not there to replace employees, it's there to give them time back so they can focus on building relationships. I'm Mirat, Director of Product Growth at Kolena. This is the Pragmatic AI Podcast. Thank you very much, Todd, for being here with us on the podcast. We have here Todd Woodburn from Highview to talk about insurance and the impact of AI on insurance. Todd, would you mind introducing yourself to the viewers?
Sure. Hey, Murad, how you doing, man? Super happy to be here. I have been in insurance for just shy of 20 years now, and I have started out in insurance as a commercial underwriter, and 18 years later, still doing insurance underwriting. So, I've been at various different companies. I've worked on multi-line, and now we are specific to doing just workers' compensation.
Mm, that's interesting. This is at Highview. You're focused on workers' comp only, right?
Yep, I have been at Highview since 2000 and oh boy, 24.
Mhm.
So just going on 2 years now.
That's exciting. I mean, that's very interesting that you have been, in that market for such a long time. So, also about Highview. What does Highview do? What is their focus? And then we can sort of take it from there to sort of go through your experience with insurance.
Sure. So Highview is a regional workers' compensation insurance carrier based in New York and writing heavily and primarily in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, with some additional opportunities in Maryland and Virginia. We've got some opportunity to write in Georgia,
Mm,
but mostly what we do is in New York and New Jersey, and we write heavily in the healthcare space. So we do a lot of nursing, home health, different types of doctors, and we can do hospitals, social services as well.
mm,
And we also write, we kind of have a broad appetite as well. We do contractors and various different wholesale operations or retail operations, but hyper focused on the healthcare industry.
right. And for folks who might not know in details what underwriting means for insurance, would you mind explaining like what does it entail? What is the main objective of an underwriter?
That's a good question. It's funny. When I first started in insurance, a friend of mine was the underwriting director, and or excuse me, a friend of mine's dad, and he came to me and he was like, "Hey, do you want to be an underwriter?" And I said, "What's underwriting?"
Right.
I was a biology major in college and just kind of dumb when it comes to the world of finance and insurance. And so he kind of led me on a really easy understanding of it, which is writing profitable business for your insurance carrier. And that profitable is the key there. So when an underwriter takes a look at a piece of business, we're looking at any key factor that we can to get an idea of whether or not we're going to be able to turn around and make a profit on that piece of business.
Right.
So as you know, in insurance, the trade-off there is you pay a premium for your policy, and in exchange for that, we cover any losses, depending on
Right.
the situation. But in workers' comp, we would cover injuries to employees.
Mhm.
And so we have to analyze that and make sure that at the end of the day, what we write is going to be profitable.
That's an interesting way of framing it. I haven't thought about it like that. So basically, it's just the process of underwriting. It involves so much processing of data because to assess whether or not a situation or an opportunity is profitable, you have to assess so many different aspects of a business for doing that. Let me ask you a question on sort of you've been doing this for such a long time. Uh, tell me about like has the landscape changed, the underwriting and insurance underwriting landscape? Has it changed significantly over the last 20 years? And if it has, like what has been some of the changes that you observed?
It's funny. The answer to that is really no. The landscape has remained, essentially unchanged as far as, what we do.
Right.
How we do it, however, has changed significantly. When I first started underwriting, we were coming out of a world of, I mean, I don't think most of us even had laptops at the time.
Right.
We were still working on
That's
desktops,
true.
which, what was before desktops, typewriters.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and supplemental applications and just additional information that we got from the agent. Now we have, a lot more information at our fingertips, whether it's from looking into OSHA or looking into just Medicare.gov and the information that you can get online, websites, reviews.
Right.
The level of data that we have now at our fingertips has grown,
Right.
exponentially.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very that's a very good perspective there. And with that, like, let's say if you were to think about what you were doing 10, 15 years ago, or like, even not that far back, does that additional data, do you think it is like helping with better underwriting, or is there a trade-off between, hey, the volume of data and how much time I need to process that and how much time I need to actually grab insights from this versus having fewer data points to be able to get to the same conclusion? How have you been sort of feeling this access to additional data is impacting the quality and speed of your decisions in underwriting?
So in the underwriting world, we have this thing called paralysis analysis, where as you can look at an account, you do have to make a decision and you do need to make it quickly. But a lot of times underwriters can fall into a trap of over underwriting
Right.
or over analyzing an account or very so with the more information, that trade-off becomes, did I catch it all?
Right.
Did I miss something? Was there something out there that if I would have known that at the time of writing this, would have changed my opinion of the risk. And so yeah, there's definitely a trade-off there where if the level of information you get is, well, hey, this is the information I have to make a decision based off of a few questionnaires that I have, is a lot different than, hey, I have access to the world's information at this
Right.
point. And so, there's a responsibility to the underwriter of doing their due diligence to get out there and see if they can find, that nugget of information, that piece of information that would, potentially change our, overall look of the account.
Right. Yeah. And I'm assuming this information that you need to process for for the purpose of underwriting or assessing the business, it comes in all different shapes and formats across different sources. Um, has that been like, is the change in how you receive the information over the time? Do you think, I guess, that information, access to information and transparency and access to data is going in the right direction in terms of, hey, both access to data, the format of the data, and the ease of analysis of it? Is it moving in the right direction, or we're just getting into a point where it's just a lot of noise? The data is coming in ways that are harder to process than before.
We work with independent agents. These are independent business owners that have, their own operations, their own way of doing things, multiple different systems. You can have individuals that are still working in paper. You can have individuals that are, working
Right.
exclusively in a digital world. I still get applications in that are handwritten, and I get applications, that have been compiled and completed and professionally,
Interesting.
put together. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I could get my loss runs in an Excel document
Right.
with everything cleanly laid out, or I could get loss information, on a really bad photocopy that is tilted sideways.
Right.
So yeah, the quality of data changes depending on what business I'm working with and what systems they have in place.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. And sort of the thing that I want to sort of talk about next is, okay, so that we talked about the landscape, how it has changed, and mainly around sort of the decision is still the same, but the data that you have access to is now a lot more. And your team is, and everybody is trying to basically get out of the analysis paralysis, like not fall into that trap. So my question for you is, I mean, like we all know there has been a boom in artificial intelligence, mainly after the large language models that have been released, starting with OpenAI. Has there been an impact in your industry or line of work post AI? Do you see that when you are, um, talking with colleagues or in the industry in general? Has that the impact of the advancements in AI, has that been translated into tangible sort of improvements into the world of underwriting yet?
Absolutely. So when, I think we're all kind of on the riding this current wave, this what it kind of feels like the first wave. Um, and when I first started, even 2 years ago, the conversation was, "Hey, do you use ChatGPT?
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
is it okay to use ChatGPT?
Hmm.
Like, how do you guys feel about that?" And then the other models start coming out. We released Copilot, and we use Microsoft Copilot for certain aspects of our job. But the sky's the limit with it, and the potentials there, are so varied as to how the user is able to use that data,
Right.
and how well you can sit down and have that prompting, that conversation, that the way that you word something with the model, changes from person to person. And so consistency is something that you always want to see when it comes to underwriting. The quality of your underwriting is really determined by, are you able to consistently produce results, and are you able to, consistently convey your thoughts across to your file, and year over year as you review that file, or managers review that file, or claims adjusters take a look at the file. That consistency is key there. And so the improvement was really individualized
Mm,
depending on a person's ability to uptake
I see.
using the model at first. But I've seen more standardization come into play, and I think that as more standardization is coming in, we're seeing better results.
Mm, I see. So so the stages. So when you rolled out Copilot, people are starting using ChatGPT more. The improvement was at the individual level, and you're saying
Right.
now, what you're seeing, that improvement even accelerating, is when that is standardized across teams or teams functions.
Once the honeymoon was over, when it came to playing hangman with ChatGPT,
Right. Yes, that's true.
or getting generate some fun images, it was like, what can this thing do, as far as data analysis? And so in my curiosity, I was putting some stuff on there just to see, were you able to review this PDF? Were you able to review this,
Mm,
Excel document? What information could you pull out of it? And it was at that time that we had, implemented our underwriting account analysis, and being able to, uh, you know, take certain, if you were to take, like, let's say, a loss control survey,
right.
and put that in, and then have it, what are some key points to that loss control survey?
Right.
Or what are some key concerns that that are noted in there?
Right.
Um, you know, that type of stuff was really, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what you started with. So this is after you had like a standard operating procedure for some assessment, and you started like playing with ChatGPT and Copilot to sort of figure out,
Right.
hey, like, can you understand my instructions that better and be able to give me an assessment of like loss control or policies that are implemented for loss control. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. I could see the value there. I mean, like these large language models are so good at, or they gotten really good at. Initially, they were not. Like, in hindsight, when you compare your experience today, when I compare my experience today with my experience with them 2 years ago, it's just the rate of improvement is staggering. But they're really good at like doing now large context sort of analysis on understanding pattern, understanding issues, highlighting things that are, again, humans can do it. It's just going to take a long time. And I think one thing you touched on, which is very important, is consistency, right? Like you have this it could be very subjective process, which is,
Right.
like you need to risk assess a business. It could be very objective. Um, and how do you standardize that so you can have a reliable metric that you can go off of when you're thinking about risk and profitability. I think
Yeah.
that aspect is very important that you highlighted there. Um,
Well, and I would say one of the things that we've determined too, through the use of large language models is you can ask it to do the same thing that it did the first time,
right,
and it can come up with a different result. So, it's not always consistent, even in the same iteration, same data,
right,
same data points, same different concerns. Like the judgment that it uses. And so what we've done as a company is move away from any type of judgment calls.
mhm,
And what we found, most beneficial is um, putting the data in front of the underwriter.
right,
So, there isn't really any room for the model to say this is a good risk or this is a bad risk anymore. Now it says, here are the facts.
mhm,
And being able to get that information in front of the underwriter has, you talk about an improvement. That is where we've seen the greatest improvement now,
right,
is just, how quickly, and that's really the big thing too. You're absolutely right. The underwriters, I've been doing this for 18 years. When I was previously reviewing loss runs, a lot of times it was taking a loss run, opening up Excel, and you just start typing. And it
right,
could be 2, 3, 4 hours, depending on how many losses you're dealing with. You're writing the date, the cause of loss, indemnity cost, medical cost, what's the total cost? Is it
right.
open? Is it closed? And it's just data entry, data entry, data entry. And what took us 4 hours in the past, now with AI, now with large language models, 5 minutes,
Right.
2 minutes.
Yeah. So, is was the is it fair to say like your first real application or real deployment of AI across the company would have been the sort of understanding the loss runs? That's fair, like analyzing loss runs, data extraction through loss runs.
Yeah, that's definitely the first case that we started to use AI in in a consistent manner.
Right. Yeah, I'm curious. So one of the things that I wanna cover here is um, there is always like the adoption and expansion of AI across an organization is you identify the use case, you run a pilot project on that use case, and then depending on the success of that, then you start getting more and more part of the business to adopt the process. Take us through what your experience has been and what tips you have for us.
It's like a sandbox, it's like an open world. And, to anybody that goes out there and plays video games, a lot of times these sandbox games, they don't have a good starting point.
Right.
When, even a good story, um, you're introduced to an idea, and then, it continues to go throughout time. But it's kind of the sky's the limit. And when it comes to large language models and AI, it's a blank slate. I
Mhm.
think you go out to the market and you say, "Hey, I need a product that's going to do, it's going to read Accord forms for me."
Right.
So you go out, you get that product, it reads Accord forms for you. That's
Mhm.
what it does,
Right.
and it implements it into your system to the API. Whereas with large language models, it's the sky is truly the limit.
Mhm.
And, one thing that I've learned when it comes to AI, and, again, kind of talking about consistency versus individuality, everybody has something to bring to the table. Whether it is my experience with workers' comp, then you've got somebody else's experience with compliance.
Mhm.
You've got somebody else's experience with risk analysis, or you have somebody else's experience with claims analysis. And so, one of the things to think about when working with implementing a large language model that I have found valuable is really looking at it like team approach,
Right.
and how what it's going to do is, it's effectively just the DNA of your organization running in the background.
Right.
And for every person that has a thought or an idea that brings it to the table, it can improve the output.
Right.
uh, you know, Double-edged sword. Now you've got, so many cooks in the kitchen. So, it's also a challenge in and of itself, making sure that you can cut through the white noise, get to the meat of what it is that you're trying to accomplish,
Mhm.
in such a way that you don't have everybody raising their hand and be like, well, can it do this? Well, and it is, yes, it can. But one of the challenges that we've run into is because of the consistent nature of improvement, we've constantly been changing our model. We've constantly being improvement, and asking a team to consistently and constantly have to change the way that they do things, at such a breakneck pace has been a challenge in and of itself. It's almost like, we can run 1,000 miles an hour now, but our shoes are wearing out way too fast.
Right.
And so, we do have to slow it down the process and say, okay, because it can do so much, it's a fire that can get out of the fireplace too fast,
Right.
right?
So how do you, like, tactically, how do you get ahead of that? Like, do you set up meetings, cadences where you review with the team how do you basically make sure the team doesn't um, get distracted with the capabilities that now you have and focus on what's important and delivering ROI?
What we have determined is that we have to set our own schedule
Mhm.
on releasing updates and releasing, so if we have a product that's working, we have, agents that are doing a specific task that they're working, to allow that to simmer for a little while.
Right. Right.
Yes, we can improve it. Yes, and if you got a bug on it, then obviously you got to deal with it. But allowing that to simmer for a little while, and just, if we're gonna do updates, we're gonna do it at once a month,
Right. Mm. That's good
once a
advice.
quarter. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good advice. And in that process, I mean, one thing that is very interesting you mentioned is, hey, like, you just giving access to individual team members to be able to collaborate on a particular use case, or you know or different use cases. You're able to basically plant the seed and see the technology grow into places that you were not maybe thinking about early on. But as any new sort of technology rollout, and I think generally large language models and AIs have been at the center of this. There are some skeptics out there that are like, hey, I don't know if this is the right solution, or I don't know if this is going to work well. Did you have to deal with that? And if yes, um, how were you able to convince them or not convince them of what the products or these solutions can do for them?
It's so funny that you say that because it's literally where my mind is going, as this conversation unfolds. I'm like, that is one of the challenges,
Hmm.
is not only is this a new technology, but it's also something that I think that, science fiction wise has been ingrained in us for so long. AI is going to destroy us.
Right. Yeah, that's
It's
true.
going to take over the world. It's going to turn us into,
Hmm.
slaves, blah, blah, blah. End of humanity. Uh, and I don't see that with large language models.
Hmm.
This isn't like AGI. This is something that to me, um, it takes some convincing to help people to see that what we can do with it is really up to the individual.
Hmm.
Like, I remember the day before Google, right? I remember when Google was released.
Yeah.
And before that, I remember before Wikipedia was released, and doing research papers and going to a library and
Hmm.
pulling down the different reference materials. And, you know, to the individual that said, oh my gosh, Wikipedia, it's all a bunch of junk, you can't use it. Well,
Right.
yes, but also no. There are benefits to being able to go into Wikipedia and looking up a biography, and then, using those citations for the original source material rather than just, taking it from. And I see a lot of that with large language models as well. How you prompt it, what are your sources, where are you getting this information from? And one of the best adoptions that I've seen, or helping people to adopt it faster, was when citations were used, where when you say, okay, please go online and look up information about this account and tell me where you got that information from, and list those sources. So now you have a document that says, okay, for instance, let's say that we're looking up the operations on somebody, and it goes into searches online to figure out, websites and reviews from Yelp and blah, blah, blah. A little link right there. And so for the individual, it looks at it and says, okay, here's your summary, but here's the links to where I got that information. That was a game changer. That helped adoption a lot faster. And I
Right.
think also removing judgment calls,
Mm.
that's helped adoption a lot better too. Where instead of, a model that
That's
comes in
smart.
and says, this is a high risk or this is a low risk, it says, here are risk factors
Right.
to be considered. And that's helped adoption as well, where, again, showing people how to use it, and then also, helping to alleviate fears. I mean, I just read an article the other day that OpenAI is investing, I don't know, like $1 billion or so in the very field of helping with the fears that are surrounding AI.
in my view. I mean, the first few times where I was skeptical of an answer that I received, after a prompt, I looked at the source material or looked at the reasoning if that was possible. I'm like, okay, like that makes sense. I trust you more now. But it took a little bit of a trying and reading the reasoning and reviewing the citations before you build that trust, which is, I think, is very important. Um,
Yeah.
Maybe my other question around the adoption piece. So we talked about like individuals building trust with this new sort of application that they'd like to put in place. Were there any challenges from deploying a new solution at an organization level, besides like the human aspect of it, which is the trust that you had to deal with at all? Or is that sort of that the the ROI is so obvious that that part is really easy? Like, did you have to um, convince on the ROI before delivering or getting a solution to be used, or that wasn't a challenge that you had to deal with?
So far, I think that the benefit is pretty obvious. So, when let's just take the loss runs, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we can do now is we can feed it loss runs and we ask it to identify key metrics. So let's say that I want to see every loss that's over $50,000,
Right,
or I want to see every loss that's still open, or I want to see every loss that involved a combative situation.
right.
It pulls that information right in front of you. Whereas historically speaking, those of us that have been in the industry understand that's something that is a manual process that
Mm-hmm.
does take time. The information that you get from that is no different than if you would have manually done that.
Right,
And so what you've saved is time,
right.
and a large amount of time. So where we've seen the benefit as an organization is as our submissions have increased, and we've actually in February alone we've doubled the amount of submissions that we had from February of 2025, with a smaller staff. And that's not to say we want a smaller staff. It's just to say that we had some individuals that had to go out unexpectedly, and they're still with the organization and all that, but they we've been lower in the number of people that we've had and being able to handle double the submissions. um, Not ideal, but also having the fact, having these tools at our fingertips has shown us, okay, this is definitely an improvement.
How is the staff's experience, like your experience and your team members' experience with using these AI technologies? Do you feel like is everybody burning out, or people are still like having a good experience at work? What is the individual like experience of folks dealing with these tools in managing the same load or larger amount of loads?
I think the challenge that you run into is that it kind of it gives you that, I throw it back to that first analogy. Not sure where I came up with that one, but where a guy can run 5 miles an hour, now he can run 20 miles an hour, but his shoes are wearing out. We have to be careful with that, because on one end I can quickly come in and now I can quickly qualify an account, look at the losses, get out a quote. um, you know but now on the back end you're still dealing with the human piece. You're still dealing with the relationship piece. Following up with a submission or with a quote, or following up for information, or so on one end, yes, we can handle so much more of where the data analysis is now reduced, and so we can handle a greater load. But that greater load still doesn't necessarily translate into, I can also manage my relationships in the same speed at which I used to be able to. So it is one of those things where learning how to balance this. We're taking off the training wheels to the bicycle, but we're leaning too hard to the left, and so we've got to learn how to really get this balance going. But I would say that by especially having individuals that have been in the industry for a long time and remembering what it was like to do XYZ, and now we have these tools that can do this so much faster, and many times pull information into our fingertips that we previously, you ask a model to search for this individual. Let's say that you're asking for information on an account, and you've got a name and you've got an address, and it's finding things that I wouldn't have necessarily searched for.
Mm,
through
interesting.
through different places that have information on that account that you've had, oh, this 5-star rating from momsplace.com, talking about XYZ and XY. Oh, okay, this is great. These guys really know what they're doing. And so
Right.
allows you to make a faster decision on that. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, it's comes with its own set of challenges. It's not
right.
just like something that comes in and says, okay, life's better,
Right.
bam, we're making more money, let's rock. It's something that we have to look at and say, we're seeing improvements here. How do we translate that into improvements over in this
Right.
side?
Right, right. I think you touched on something really important here is that, which I believe wholeheartedly. There's a lot of doom and gloom people about AI application, about AI taking all the jobs away and all that. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it's going to help us focus on more important things, while the quote unquote less important. I'm going to say less important in quotes because they're very important. They need to be done well, but they are manual repetitive tasks, and they can provide time savings on those, and then help us with other aspects of jobs, which is relationship building, making sure that on the human level, you're still building connections with colleagues as well as customers and clients. So it's very interesting you're saying this. I mean, and that transition from, okay, I used to spend all this time on this manual work or data entry work. Now I need to, get that on autopilot, and then, focus on building relationships. I think is a very good strategy. It's for companies to identify and deploy. One thing I wanted to ask you, we talked about, sort of the impacts of at your work at Highview today of adopting AI. We talked about time savings and growth. But one thing I remember working with you initially was, there were I wasn't, you educated me a lot in the world of insurance and workers comp, and it was very fun watching you sort of deal with our products and try different things with it. I want to see if you can share an experience you had your opinion about what AI can do in the underwriting world changed or shifted from, hey, okay, they can just do maybe, initially you went in with, oh, it can only do data extraction, to, oh my god, it can do so much more. If you had such an experience, those are really good stories. If you can share with us, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, I don't know which one to pick.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I go back to that first conversation I had with you guys as you're demonstrating the product to us, and I think we're currently looking for another, we're looking for other tools that we can use as a company. And in most of those situations, you have somebody come on and they make a demonstration and they say, okay, here's what we can do. This is what we did with this client. You kind of came to us and you said, what do you want to do? And we were like, okay, do this. And as you demonstrated the product, it was like, oh wow, okay, hold on, do this. And you demonstrated the product and we were like, oh my gosh. And so that just sparked me to be like, what can it not do? And I still haven't really figured that out. I mean, like there are a few little things that I'd love to see. Like I'd love to, see a future where you can ask it to graph information and put out, some type of line graph or pie chart or something like that. And I know that's down the future. I know
yeah.
it's just a matter of time before that happens because I think that's what was so exciting about it to me.
Mm,
When we asked you to look into the loss run aspect of it, and then I think there was like a little box that we had where it was like, can you look online for operations?
right,
Look for a website,
right.
and then you found a website, and we were like, can you summarize what's on that website?
Mm.
And it was like, yeah.
No,
And
yeah,
they're like, um, okay, that's pretty cool. What about with loss runs? Can you kind of pull to the surface, some trends, any trends that we're seeing, an increase in losses year over year? And it was like, yes. And it gives you this narrative of, hey, over the past 5 years, the losses, although the numbers have stayed relatively low as far as total incurred has, the number of claims have increased from 10 to 20 to 50 to 100, so there's an increasing trend in
mm,
overall losses. That's not something that I expected.
right,
What I expected was information, here you go, but
right.
like the ability for it to understand patterns like you were talking about earlier. And isn't that what we have all evolved to do? Is it's just pattern recognition,
Right.
finding those patterns. And so I don't know if that answers your question. It was really cool to see that my imagination wasn't limited.
Right. Yeah, I remember those early interactions, and I we first as you know, our engagement with our customers and you guys, is hey, what is the process that you want to automate? We'll come in and automate that for you. But it was very interesting for us to see how you individually just saw the potential opportunities here and brought in, hey, not just loss run, let me bring in a court form, let me bring in the the mod experience numbers, let me bring in some business intelligence, let me bring in some all the other aspects in here to put together a comprehensive underwriting package. Whereas,
Yeah.
okay, it's just a Excel that is digitized and has a few graphs on it, which would have solved your problem. But it was very interesting for me, that experience for you to from an industry, as an industry expert, get in there and like push the platform to its limits and try different
Yeah.
things in there, which is always great. Okay, sweet. One other question that I want to sort of for us to go through, is that there are some folks out there, that they might try some AI solution or AI product, and they might not be most happy with the outcomes there. Have you experienced something like that where you're like, okay, this is not good. This is not a good outcome that I'm getting from them. And what kind of advice do you have for those guys that are like their initial experiences are not great with AI tools?
So I had a use case just recently
Mm-hmm.
where I wanted to see audit trends.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at last year's payroll when it was first come in.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because in the world of workers' comp, we base our policies off of estimated payrolls at the beginning, and then we audit at the end of the year, to see what the actual payrolls were. Because your policy's premium is based off of payroll. And as we all know, payroll fluctuates greatly. It could increase, it could decrease. And so, if it decreases, you get money back. If it increases, there's an additional premium,
Mm-hmm.
because we're covering the risk
Right.
for your total organization based off of
Okay.
the number of
Individuals.
employees, and therefore the exposure is, of course, your employees. So,
Right.
setting that up to say, I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what I tried, I could not get it to do that analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my prompting was struggling. And so, one of the things that I loved, in the beginning when we first were working with Kolena, you didn't have that, conversation
Right.
aspect of it. And when you release the conversation of it, being able to step back and allow the system to guide you
Mm-hmm.
in getting where you want to go. So instead of just saying, hey, do this, it was, here's my problem. This is what I want it to do. Help me create the prompt for that. And,
Mm-hmm.
don't just ask for that answer right off the bat, but allow the system to sort of tease the information.
Right.
And now we have a really wonderful audit analysis that
Interesting.
just it does multiple different pieces. So, at first I tried. It was very
Mm,
frustrating. I wasn't able to get it, but as using conversation, setting out, and this is where it comes down to communication. I mean, a large language model is, a really complicated autocorrect, right?
right.
It's
Right.
it's giving you a prediction of what it thinks, the next word is. And so the better you're able to convey what you want, the better the system is able to give you an
Yeah,
answer that is necessary.
that's
So,
very good
it may
advice.
take, yeah, so it may take more finesse of trying to clearly put thought on paper. It's not a magic box that you can just be like, do this now, and it does it.
Yeah.
To your satisfaction. It's a skill that does have to be learned.
Yeah.
Though I think it has helped a lot of people, that don't understand, coding and all the other stuff, which is me. It's been a huge gap filler.
Right.
If that
Yeah,
makes sense.
totally. And you guys at Highview are trying to like have the application across different line of business as well. It's not like it
Yes.
started with you on underwriting, and we're seeing a lot of interest and applications of these across different lines of business. I think loss control is a very good example,
Mhm.
of the applications here, or some sort of claims processing. Again, those are data heavy, workflows that, again, we're seeing really good opportunities there. And on the topic that you mentioned, I think that's a very good advice. Just to summarize that, is it's really, I find it to be really helpful, is that when I want to get to an objective, I kind of want an answer. I can just explain what my objective is and let the AI help me with breaking down into its components, and then
Right.
execute and iterate on each component. I think that's sort of the summary of, hey, if there's something that's too complicated, you can go about that way. I think that applies big time. And the other thing that I have actually tried and is really successful is that I say, hey, I want to do this thing. Ask me questions that you have so you can help me better. And I've seen that to be
Yep.
very helpful as well. And ask questions, and it can do the process much better. Um, Let me ask you this. So, you've been on this trajectory of and in this industry for a long time. You came, from 20 years ago, before Google and Wikipedia, and into this world of AI, information at fingertips. Um, where do you think we're headed? Like, where do you see the future of generally, like, AI applications of AI across insurance, underwriting, or other aspects as it relates to sort of insurance?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. At least it's going to take some intentionality here.
Mm,
But I hope that where this takes us, and I can see it taking us there, is more human interaction,
mm,
not less. And that's going to be key in all of this. We've got to make the important things the most important things. And where we can remove some of those back end slower processes, we replace them with a better ability to communicate, a better ability to have more FaceTime and more conversations, and grow in our grow in our relationship with our clients. Because at the end of the day, I don't really want to talk to a computer. If I pick up a phone and I call a company, I don't want to know that I'm talking to an AI on the end of that. I want to have a person, and so I think that's where it's gonna. And I think we're starting to see that benefit. I think people are waking up to that realization of, okay, we don't want AI to just do everything and us sit back and eat grapes. Like, we want we want to still embrace that human interaction, and so using it where it's most beneficial, and refusing to use it in areas that are ultimately going to remove that human element. I would say the number one thing is designing designing your prompts and designing your system in such a way that it doesn't take away the human aspect of it.
mm,
For instance, when we first started using it, it was, we were like, okay, can you tell us if you think this account is going to be profitable or not?
mm.
Um, that was kind of a failed experiment. It didn't really do a good job. We mostly disagreed on whether or not it was going to be a profitable account, unless it was, an account that just had terrible losses year over year over year. Then it was,
Very
we
obvious, right?
probably didn't even get to the summary at that point because we could see the trend ourselves.
Mm,
But whatever the case may be, um, what where we spent a lot of time trying to get the system to give us sort of um, an overall feeling for the account, that was failed, and we could have spent more time getting the system to give us those key pieces of information that allows the underwriter to make the decision they feel is necessary.
right.
So I would say really work on setting up your system in such a way that doesn't remove the human element but enhances it.
That's very good advice. That's very good advice. Well, Todd, thank you so much for your time here. It's always such a delight talking to you about your experience and your sort of your background in underwriting and how you're using AI. That it was inevitable for this to go longer than anticipated. So yeah, again, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Appreciate you guys too.
That was Todd Woodburn from Highview Insurance. If you're dealing with document heavy workflows and wondering whether AI can help, Todd just showed you the math. Next time on the Pragmatic AI podcast, we're sitting with Jeanette from Levin to talk about how her team is rethinking document processing in a completely different industry. Same question we always ask: what's actually working? If you got something out of this podcast, share it with someone who's still on the fence about AI adoption. If you want to see what Kolena can do for your workflows, head to kolena.com. I'm Eric Ramlu. Thanks for listening.